Number one, it's time for a haircut. Number two, time to read a Webbot report. As I always do and say, I go through this thing. I don't read the whole entire thing, obviously. That would be copywriting it anyways. But I find what I feel is the most important stuff, in my opinion, that I feel like reading, and I just do a little small summary of it, reading it to you. Yes, there'll be things that I missed out because I chose to leave them out. The original report is 33 pages long. If you want to buy it, you go to halfpasthuman.com, halfpasthuman.com, and it's the first thing available, I believe. Also, you may hear dates where it talks about this coming spring or this coming winter, whatever. Like I always say, I've been following this thing for years. It might be 2 or 3 springs out, not this spring or winter, etc. But when they do make some hits in this thing, in these Webbot reports, they can be spectacular sometimes, even though they're later on happening when they thought they would have already happened or whatever. So, we will start, and when I start reading these paragraphs, I may just continue reading, and you may think I'm reading the same paragraph or part of another paragraph that's related to that, but it's not. It's because I skipped that section and went on to another section. So if you're expecting it to make sense, it may not make sense in that respect because I'm just kind of skipping around. But it's usually very understandable, and I don't have any problems with people figuring out what I'm talking about or where I was going with this thing. So, an unexpected meme that has arisen from the data sets over the past run data collection gathering is labeled by them at Half Past Human as next level sheet. SHEEIT. Sheet. Next level of sheet we will have to deal with. This next level aspect is appearing in all entity groups, meaning in all of the data sets that they get from the Webbot report, all the different categories, it's there. It shows up in all of them. And in all of these, it appears at multiple levels and in diverse association with many linguistic structures that are both contradictory and competitive in their participation in making our collective future. Other new memes, including a rising reference to clouds in various forms, as well as underseas or sub-ocean subsets. Please pay close attention to the section on Fukushima, as it has linguistic variances that are potentially impacting of the interpretation. And again, it is his interpretation of the data that his tool feeds him, so to speak. And then when I read it to you, I'm pretty much reading it word for word, but then I'll usually sometimes reinterpret something if I understand that it's probably not going to make sense to you. So then you have my interpretation. So, anyways, so pay attention to the Fukushima area, the section which it comes up in a minute, as it has linguistic variances that are potentially impacting of the interpretation. The global coastal event, and he says we really missed on that name, is actually ongoing. This is a direct consequence of the expansion of Earth. The effects of the expansion of the planet are the cause of some of many new planetary features. I'm going to say, just because he had this thing in the data a long time ago, and it kept reappearing, the global coastal event, and you have the remote viewer saying this thing hitting the ocean, it looks like, slamming into it, causing what appears to be a global coastal event. I think I'm going to sit on the sidelines and say I don't know if he really means to say that right now. Of course, I'm not speaking for him, but I've seen way too many things happen way later that were spot on. So I still think there's that potential for something big to hit. Again, the remote viewers, the detail that they gave, I find it hard to believe that the global coastal event is starting off and it's not really one big event. And I'm not going to say I buy that. There's no way. But again, he's interpreting his own data, and it's his opinion. So he has his, and I have mine with his data. Moving on. So, the global coastal event, we really missed on that name, is ongoing. This is a direct consequence of the expansion of Earth/Terra. The effects of the expansion of the planet are the cause of some of the many new planetary features. These include the North African Rift, the realignment of airport runways, the redistribution of satellites, the volcanoes, earthquakes, new lands, new mountains under the oceans, and various more minor physical changes effects. The expansion of the planet is also participating in such things as new winds. Strengths at previously unrecorded levels is the key word attached to that. And yes, I know about that hurricane or typhoon that just hit. That was like epic. Most of these new weather/climate phenomena are directly attributed to the energies from space, keyword, that have been in the Webbot reports for a long, long time. Of course, it is also the increased energy from the sun that is causing the expansion process, but in a more direct way, the solar output, as well as unknown energies from space, are the cause of the extreme weather manifestations. Further aspects of the expansion of the planet include new mineral strikes, as well as new formations forecast to impact food crop production. These new land formations are forecast to include rifts, splits, cracks, and other tears. Many of these are described as becoming new water places/carriers. So as well as new lands rising as a part of the expansion of Terra, we will also get some new waterfront property. He says, and they say we're not making any more stuff, waterfront. The data accretion patterns have some good and bad news regarding Fukushima, as well as TEPCO, the company that was overseeing it, their epic fail. The bad news is that fall and winter of 2013-2014 are being described as a dangerous and fearful, as well as damaging and harming. These trends continue their accrual as model spaces progress through the winter northern hemisphere. And again, when for all you new people that don't understand this, when he talks about the trends continue their accrual as model spaces progress through to winter, what he's talking about is this Webbot report is looking at immediate data, like in a timeline, like what's about to happen soon, what's about to happen mid-range out, what's about to happen long-range out. So as he's saying, as model space has progressed, in other words, now we're here today, we're going to, as model space has progressed in the next few months, this is what we see, and then so on and so forth. So that's what he's talking about when he uses that term. So the the trends, which is what I just read you about, the Fukushima, regarding it as dangerous, fearful, damaging, and harming, these trends continue their accrual as model spaces progress through the winter processes, in other words, in the Webbot data, until just about March of 2014. Then there are some new language patterns that develop. These are not quite understandable. This may be due to inadequacy of our current vocabulary. In other words, the data may, just may be, forecasting a new something we don't have words for yet that we're going to have to come up with. This has arisen within our Alta reports, the old Webbot reports, many times where there were forecasts of new language usages appearing. These have, so far, never failed to manifest into our reality. So, he says a good example is the current use of the city-state, which he said in the previous couple reports about Cyprus, how the word Cyprus was going to be coming out and being like Cyprus. That was going to be the new term, Cyprus. And sure enough, the country of Cyprus had not a bailout, but a bail-in, where they took your deposits to bail in the banks instead of bail out the banks. So the whole world now, especially on the alternative side of things, all of us would use that term, Cyprus. Oh, don't worry, your account or your country is going to Cyprus your bank accounts, etc. That's one exactly perfect example he just gave of them saying in other reports, get ready for a new term like this, and then they nail it again. So that's what he's saying. There's going to be some new term, Fukushima or Fukud, you know what I mean? Something maybe is what might be coming out. I don't know. So then there are some new language patterns that develop. These are not quite understandable. This may be due to the inadequacy of our current vocabulary. In other words, the data may or just, may be a new something we don't have words for yet. This has arisen with our Alta reports many times. Again, the city-state name was the keyword, and that came to be Cyprus, to now indicate contextually basically being screwed over by banks and your money being taken out of your account, or a bail-in In both cases, these new linguistic structures were forecast ahead of their appearance by several months. We think we have such a situation developing now. There is some hesitation always, as the data is never really straightforward in these instances. Rather, it is a case of forecasting a new word or phrase by inference rather than implication, if that makes sense. We are together in unusual... we are basically forecasting the lack of particular language as the accretion patterns are placing more disjointed words together in unusual arrangements, along with the rise in the appearance of the unknown place marker within the sets, the data sets. So the data sets around the Fukushima disaster are forecasting a definitive change that will merely not that we merely do not have yet adequate descriptors to effectively communicate what it is. As model spaces progress through into April, the change of state leading to new words situation is further forecast by taking yet another large shift. And he says, now please note here that there are repeated references to the situation becoming better somehow that are temporally linked to the big shift. The lexical structures appearing within the big shift dataset have a predominance of good and beneficial as modifying attributes. So, and he's blanked a couple words out that I don't understand what that means. So blank, and it ends in AN. Star, 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 AN. Blank and an interpretation that may make sense within this complex linguistic accretion is that a newness, that's N-E-W, newness, appears that may represent a natural or human-induced change such that humans perceive and feel much more positive about the situation. Now, noting the ambiguities and the natural tendency towards hope in dire situations, nonetheless, the interpretation is clearly stating that the newness around April will be of a good nature. Again, noting a sparsity of details of attributes, though no aspects that is suggestive of a new context-forming blank. The only data sets that have any descriptors are being headed by shimmering. This shimmering is not, as may be first assumed when dealing with runaway nuclear power cores, a negative consequence, but rather has good and positive and beneficial aspects/attribute sets associated with it. The positive aspects/attributes now appearing within the data set aside, we have many data points indicating that the Pacific Ocean impacts of the Fuku nuclear disaster will persist for decades. The Pacific Ocean cleanup will be a direct result of the continuation, in spite of the April 2014 good news, of a need for human intervention that will persist for 2 generations. Links between the global coastal event and the 220 millions of people fleeing north, for those of you who remember that, bunch of people fleeing north, I still remember that one in the older reports, are both now extensively supported by nuclear reactors gone amok. However, the data is ambiguous about indicating that Fukushima will be one of these which motivates the Diaspora, or the moving of people northward. However, the data is ambiguous about indicating that Fukushima will be one of those which motivates the Diaspora. I just read that, sorry. Also, we note here that most of the 220 millions that flee north language is specifically focused on North America, but does not involve the West Coast except for California. So it does include California, but not really the rest of the West Coast. In point of fact, as we have had to examine code and tune the lexicon, Igor, which is his friend/partner, was put to the task of analyzing the geographic references for many of the events forecast as a further adjunct to our interpretation. So we now know that it is not merely a majority of geographic references for the East Coast corridor, but rather is over 87% focused on spaces east of the Rocky Mountain Range. This would suggest that some form of general nuclear plant crises will develop that is described as propelling the Diaspora towards the north. The data, I know this is another section now. The data sets accruing to the sun, S-U-N, as the burning ball in the sky, the sun subset, are large enough to double the size of attribute sets in a single processing. These sets, though diverse, have a very slight preponderance towards a set that is dominated by ancient activity. This set includes supporting values for whipped and asterisk and glycine and homogeneous froth. These primary supporting sets are supplanted rapidly by the secondary or rising secondary sets, which go to the idea of striping, as in a tiger stripes. The striped sun effect is described as causing consternation amongst officialdom or government as they try to explain the unexplainable. Further data sets suggest that officialdom at the highest levels in the various countries will be scrambling, trying to ascertain the effects of the striped sun. Further supporting sets include aspects such as fluff and feathered. Both of these sets, in their turn, are supported by the same aspect set that is headed by striped. Let's see how long I've been going. 16 minutes. I'm going to stop and just, because I know sometimes my video is going for a long time. That way, if you're in the middle of something, you can just stop the video now and watch part 2 or whatever. So I'm going to stop. This will be part 1.